Hello and welcome to Moneycontrol. Summer of 2022 was a rude shock for many Indians. Parts of the country plunged into darkness as a lot of power generators were scrambling for coal. What was happening globally is also a matter of concern. The Russian attack on Ukraine has led to a severe energy crisis all over the world. Many European nations are restarting thermal power plants and the chase for coal continues. While all that goes on, I have a very special guest with me today, the CEO and MD of Tata Power, Praveer Sinha, to talk to us on the power sector in India and what's happening globally. Hello and welcome to Moneycontrol. And thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, for joining us.
Thank you, Rachita. Always a pleasure to speak to you and to Moneycontrol.
Mr. Sinha, this has been a very interesting year from the beginning. I mean, the heat wave that we saw in April, March, and the kind of peak demand that we saw in this year really exposed a lot of vulnerabilities of the sector. The coal crisis that happened, and subsequently the government sprang into action, and a lot of things happened. But I wanted to understand from you, given that in the backdrop and given the policy announcement that the government has made so far in the year, how confident are you that the discoms are going back on track, or we will be able to avoid another such crisis anytime soon?
Let me try to break this question into two parts. One is that what happened in the month of April. This was all of a sudden because of the heat wave in especially northern and central part of India. The consumption of electricity went up. It crossed more than 200 gigawatt. In fact, it was at a level of about 207 and 208 gigawatt. And coupled with that, the supply of coal to many of these power plants got impacted because all of a sudden you had to generate that much of more capacity, which they had not anticipated, and their stocks got reduced drastically. Having said that, I think the government, the Ministry of Coal, and the railways and the power companies got into action, and I think there was no great load shedding or any power cuts that we saw during the summer months, and thereafter it has been normal. Again, in the month of October, we typically see huge demand. There was a demand, but not to the extent that we saw in the month of April, and the whole power supply situation was taken control of. Now, what we see is that there has been a huge demand in electricity in the country in last 1 year. The industries have reopened, the commercial activities have restarted, the home consumption has increased, and because of all these reasons, there is a huge increase in demand per se of electricity, which typically would happen about 3 to 4%, went up to in those months to 14-15%, and is now about 7%. So I think it's a good sign that the consumption of electricity is increasing. That means that much of economic activity, that much of growth is happening in the country. Now, when we look at India's power sector, I think it's a very resilient power sector, notwithstanding whatever challenges that we have. We have generating companies. We have more than 410 gigawatt of established capacity or installed capacity. We have a good mix of conventional generation of coal and gas. We have good hydro capacity, and in last few years, especially in last 5 to 6 years, there's been huge amount of renewable capacity that has got added. We have nearly 60 gigawatt of solar and about 50 gigawatt of wind capacity which is there. So I think generally we have a very good mix of all types of energy, and I think the way new capacity additions will happen and should happen in future, we should be in a position to be self-sufficient going forward. There would be challenges, as we have seen. The international coal prices went up because of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But notwithstanding that, India has been very largely insulated with the changes that have happened globally. And India depends mostly on its own domestic coal. Very little of it is required for blending purpose, imported coal. So I think all in all, I would say that the Indian power sector is in a much better situation. It can always improve, and it can always improve, especially in the distribution side, where we still have challenges. They still have huge AT&C losses. There are challenges on billing efficiency and collection efficiency. Theft of electricity continues to be rampant in many parts of the country, and the financial viability of the discoms continues to be very vulnerable. So I think that's an area that a lot of work needs to be done, and I do hope some of the changes in the Electricity Act amendment and some of the other notifications, rules which have been issued by Ministry of Power will help us to overcome some of these challenges.
You actually raised a very important point, which brings me to the next question, the financial viability of discoms. Interestingly, you and I are talking right now at a conference that your company is hosting in Bhubaneswar, which is on distribution utilities, and a lot of conversation has been about the health of discoms per se. Very recently, the central government addressed the different states in Udaipur in a meeting, and they also raised concerns over the financial viability of discoms. And one of the things that was discussed was that even if all discoms were to, increase tariff regularly, even with that, the kind of debt that they are dealing with, there are serious concerns over the viability per se. Now, if that is the background, then the Electricity Act, the bill that is pending, and the RDSS scheme which is being made, how much can that actually help? And between these two, do you think we have got all bases covered as far as the financial viability of discoms is concerned?
So, financial viability of discoms are dependent on two major aspects. One is their operational capability has to improve. Now, in most of the cases, what we are finding, the state's operational capability is not up to the mark. They do not use state-of-the-art technologies, whether it is in terms of the reliability of power or customer service, billing solutions, collection solutions. So many of the places, there are huge gaps, and until and unless they are able to make their operations best in the class, it would be very difficult to bring in financial viability in the sector. The second is that it needs a lot of support in terms of financing for new equipments, for new technologies. Now that is being supported by Government of India earlier through the RAP, DRP programs, and then we have now the RDSS program, which will help them and support them in going for some of the new technologies that they would like to implement. Now, both of them have to happen simultaneously. And the third aspect is the tariff revision. The tariffs have to be cost reflective. Many a times we find that the tariffs are not cost reflective. We also find that every year there is a certain amount of subsidy which the government is supposed to give when they are giving certain support to certain class of consumers in terms of the subsidy benefit that they are providing. Now that subsidy has to be paid in advance to the discom so that it takes care of their cash flow and they do not unnecessarily go and take fresh money for their working capital. So I think the financial discipline and the commercial discipline that is required in the distribution company is very important for making them financially viable. There cannot be any free lunches in this. If there is a cost of power which is determined by the regulator as a prudent cost, then that money has to be paid, and if anyone wants to give a subsidy or rebate on that, then they need to make good that. It cannot be left on the discoms to take care of their own requirement without the type of support from the government or whoever is providing the subsidy. So I think we need to work on both the areas. We need to work in making the operational improvements in the utilities. There are a whole lot of gaps over there. stealing of electricity is still very common in very many parts of India, and it is very high in few of the areas, including many of the urban and rural areas. The second is that the tariffs have to be cost reflective. It cannot be a scenario that you are not giving them a tariff which is the actual cost of service that they are providing.
So a lot of work needs to go in the distribution side. But talking of the generation side, India, of course, I mean, we depend a lot on coal. And COP26, we made a strong statement by saying that we will phase down and not phase out coal. And given the way things have changed in the world in the last 1 year, now suddenly we see all countries chasing coal. What I wanted to understand from you is, do you think this is just a blip, or are we regressing from the global ambitions of turning more towards clean energy? And also, what does it do to the coal prices going ahead? What are you factoring in?
So it's not that there are large number of coal plants which are restarted or a new coal plant is being built. There are some of them which were not being utilized fully are being utilized, but this is a very temporary phenomena till such time they get other ways of meeting the demand requirement, whether it is in terms of reduction of their demand, uh, energy conservation measures, or it is in terms of getting more LNG supply from other parts of the world. So I think the agenda for phase down cannot be diluted, and we have already seen the climate change impact globally everywhere that is happening over there. I think it will be a very retrograde step if anyone today talks of diluting the steps which have been taken. In fact, it has to be accelerated if we really want to uh, stay within the 1.5 degree by 2030. The second is that coal prices which have gone up was again because of the supply that got restricted from Russia to various parts of Europe. That gap has been now made good from other countries where they have ramped up their coal production, and we do see, at least in last 3 months, that the coal prices have stabilized or have reduced on week to week basis. So we definitely expect that the coal prices will stabilize going forward. We will not have that sort of, until unless something new happens, some new action takes place in any other part of the world. But if it is business as usual, it will get reduced, and we will have other options of meeting the energy requirement, especially in Europe.
Mr. Sinha, you have been sourcing coal, importing coal. In fact, Tata Power had the strategy even before India started looking at imported coal in a big way. For your coastal Gujarat power plant, you have an interim arrangement going on where you are compensated for the imported coal. But there is a longer issue of, recovering the higher cost, which has been ongoing with the state utility. Help me understand, because this interim arrangement is only till December. So what happens after December, and how are those conversations going with the state utility?
So this interim arrangement, which is under Section 11, is up to 31st December, and we are trying to figure out that what is the interim arrangement till 31st December. Can it be extended further, though the Section 11 orders may not be there, or it may be extended with some modifications to the existing arrangement. So we are discussing all these issues with the government, especially the Gujarat government, and hopefully we'll come to some amicable settlement on this issue.
So will that be an ongoing conversation for the long term, or are you just looking at extending this arrangement?
Yeah, it will be for the long term. It will be till the expiry of the existing PPA.
Interesting. Earlier in your comments, you spoke about what happened in March, April was also a reflection of the power demand going up. How is that panning out going ahead? Especially if we look at the short-term market, the merchant market as we refer to it, the prices seem to have been softening for quite a while now. What are you reading here? I mean, what are the indicators we are getting? Are the prices softening because the demand is softening? So what is your outlook on demand and prices for electricity?
So the demand is very seasonal. Winter months, typically you will have less demand, and again, as the summer starts in the month of March, April, the demand will increase. And also, the demand changes during different hours of the day. So now also, if you are looking at demand in the evening time, the peak time, the short-term market in the exchange continues to be very high. It goes up to, especially on a real-time market, it goes up to 10, 12 rupees. But during certain hours, it is much lower depending upon the requirement of power. So I think what we need to look at it is that uh, there would not be too much of a yo-yo. It will stabilize. You can't have a long-term scenario where you have very high cost of power, because power is the basic raw material for every industrial activity, commercial, and including residential. So it would never be very, very high prices. It will stabilize over a period of time, because more generation capacity and more of renewable coming into the play, your average cost of power will come down. So I think that in the long run, power costs will stabilize. There may be few months, few weeks where we will have very high prices, but I don't think in the long run it is sustainable to have that sort of high prices.
Okay, and of course, you have been very bullish on the renewable space. You've been growing your portfolio significantly. You recently got an investor in that portfolio as well. With the investor coming in, does the long-term plan for renewable business change in terms of the investments, in terms of the capacity? Help me understand what exactly are we targeting now?
So with the investor coming in, it makes our long-term business plan much more stable and much more surer, because they have brought in investment, and that will help us to add capacity more aggressively. So where we were earlier constrained about putting equity into the business, now with the investor, it makes us gives us more financial strength to go ahead and implement many of the projects which were getting delayed. So I think it's a good sign, and going forward, you will see huge capacity additions happening in the renewable space from our side.
But how is the demand looking like? Because when we look at the renewable power obligation, the numbers are not very promising. What is happening on that side? And do you see any change happening on the ground?
See, now what has happened is that we also need to look at it from a little wider perspective. Last 1 year, the prices of modules increased tremendously. Now, there were two reasons why it increased tremendously from China. One was because many of the factories were closed during COVID period over there, and they had zero um, uh, zero permission of doing any industrial activity during COVID period. The second was that the basic raw material for producing the prices of coal and oil and gas increased, and hence their cost of production went up. Now, because of those reasons, many of the projects which were supposed to come at a much lower price in the country, they got impacted and they have got delayed. We also saw that the domestic production plan got little delayed, because the first lot of PLI that came, the second lot of PLI was supposed to come of 19,500 crores. It has got delayed. It has still not happened, and that's why the huge capacity addition which we are trying to set up in the country to insulate ourselves from imported prices with customs duty, that will get implemented in next 1 to 2 years, and then things will improve drastically. So my feeling is that, again, when we are looking at a long term, we need to look at it from a perspective that how do we also make it more robust and more disciplined in terms of cost, in terms of sourcing, and we should not be vulnerable to certain changes which is happening in one part of the world or in other parts of the world.
But these delays, whether it is in the PLI or the supply chain, how much can it impact our goals? Because India has a very ambitious target for adding renewable energy. And like you said, because of the prices going up, a lot of generators are deferring plans. Is there a serious threat to our capacity addition plans as a country?
It has an impact, and that means that those projects which were supposed to come in last 12 months, we need to complete it in next 12 or 24 months, apart from what is supposed to come in next 12. So you need to enhance the pace of implementation. We may slip a little bit, and the actual number may not happen to the same number what has been said about 2030, but directionally we will be there. Maybe years delay in meeting the numbers that has been indicated for 2030 might happen, but I think if we are geared up and ready to run a marathon and have done everything right, then we'll reach the end of the tape if we plan it properly.
Fair enough. Mr. Sinha, even as the CEO and MD of Tata Power, you are running several marathons, if I may say so. I mean, whether it's in the discom space or with the company's debt. I mean, that is something that you have been working very hard to reduce. Tell me, what is the plan now? Because at one point of time, you were looking to unlock some value in the renewable asset and use that to pay debt. But now, since the plan has changed, help me understand what are the targets, if you have set any, to reduce debt.
So what we have done is that we are definitely divesting. Some of the divestments got delayed because we were not getting the right valuation. We'll possibly in next 12 to 24 months, many of these divestments may happen, and we'll get good value for our shareholders. We also looked at many of the businesses which have grown, including the Odisha Discom and the capacity additions in our renewable business, rooftop. That will also help us to get more cash for the growth business. And on our overall basis, while the debt number may look good, but our whole asset base will go up many more times. And that means that my financial indices, whether it is debt equity or EV EBITDA, they will be very, very healthy. And mind you, we are an infrastructure company. If we do not invest, we will not get return on the business. So for us, investment is a necessity, but if I have a good cash flow, if I have a good return, then I am able to meet the debt obligations that I have. So we expect that while our debt numbers will be there, we'll have very good EBITDAs, and we'll have very good PAT, which will take care of the repayment of the debt and our ability to cater to the requirement of the debt that we have.
Thank you so much for sharing your plans, Mr. Sinha. We'll be in touch with you. That was Mr. Praveer Sinha, CEO and MD of Tata Power, sharing plans of the company and giving us very deep insights into what's happening in the power sector. We will keep talking to him and we will keep telling you what's happening in the power sector. Until then, thank you and bye-bye.